It's the oldest land dispute in history. For centuries, Jews and Arabs have claimed rightful ownership of the land of Israel. But whose land is it? The 700 Club presents a 3-day event to explore the legal, the historical, and the political arguments of both sides. Whose land is it? Continuing Wednesday, only on the 700 Club.
Well, are we ready to select a president yet? I think the people would say so. There's more to go. It's not over yet, but it sure does look like the Donald is going to be up against Hillary. That is, if Hillary doesn't get indicted. So that could be our presidential race, so the Democrats may have to get in a substitute before it's all over. But both of those candidates won smashing victories in the Super Tuesday primaries.
They sure did. Trump is the clear leader among Republicans, and Clinton seems to have the Democratic nomination wrapped up. But their rivals say they're not giving up. George Thomas has the story.
One thing is clear from Tuesday's primary results. Republicans are fired up, and they can thank billionaire businessman Donald Trump.
This has been an amazing evening.
Voter turnout in Virginia, Georgia, Texas, Alabama, and Oklahoma shattered previously held records in 2000 and 2008. While Democrats struggled to get out the vote on Tuesday, Republican enthusiasm is at an all-time high. Regardless of the difference in enthusiasm between the two parties, Tuesday's primary results had the Democratic and Republican frontrunners racking up huge gains in the march to their party's nomination.
The stakes in this election have never been higher, and the rhetoric we're hearing on the other side has never been lower.
Both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump each won 7 states.
I am a unifier. Once we get all of this finished, I'm going to go after one person. That's Hillary Clinton.
But Trump's GOP rivals aren't giving up just yet. Ted Cruz won his home state of Texas and added Oklahoma and Alaska. Tuesday night, he asked fellow GOP rivals to step aside and get behind his campaign to stop Trump.
So long as the field remains divided, Donald Trump's path to the nomination remains more likely. And that would be a disaster for Republicans.
Senator Marco Rubio captured his first victory in the contest, winning the Minnesota caucuses.
I will campaign as long as it takes and wherever it takes to ensure that I am the next president of the United States.
And now Republicans are looking to the upcoming primaries in Michigan, Ohio, and Florida as Trump tries to build on his lead and his rivals hope to start catching up. George Thomas, CBN News.
You know, I listened to Marco, and it's like he's delusional. I just don't know. These guys, it's so easy when you're in the middle of all that and you're surrounded by partisans who are shouting, "Go for it, Marco," to step back and say, "Hey, I'm losing it." But this business about, my leading opponent is a con man, to keep saying that over and over and over again. I mean, it just doesn't sound presidential to me. But what role did evangelicals play in this? It's amazing how many evangelicals went for Trump. And our CBN News political correspondent David Brody is going to tell us his take on it. David, you've been out there with these candidates, and why are evangelicals going for Trump?
Well, I think there was a movie called It's Complicated, and I think that pretty much sums it up. But to get into the numbers, look, let's start with the exit polls from Tuesday, Pat. If you go to Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, the Deep South, Trump is winning evangelicals by about 15, 20 points. And if you look specifically at the numbers, he's winning with evangelicals that make either $75,000 or less. They are either high school educated or have some college. And then when it gets to be college educated and making over $100,000, Ted Cruz does much better. Trump still wins those evangelicals, but Cruz is much closer. And so it's fascinating to watch the numbers. I think terrorism is a big aspect of all of this. Donald Trump talks tough. Bomb the oil fields. We're going to take it to ISIS. And look, ISIS is in your face and Donald Trump is in your face. And I think evangelicals, that resonates with evangelicals, plenty of evangelicals. They like his political incorrectness. They think he's a fighter. He talks about fighting for Christianity. No one's quite sure exactly what that means. I guess we would find out if he ever did become president. But they trust him. They trust him at his word, which is fascinating that this is actually happening, but it is. And I don't quite see how the Trump train gets slowed down unless somehow, some way, Rubio or Cruz or someone gets out of the mix. But even then, I think this Trump train may be leaving the station, Pat.
I listened to Marco Rubio on a couple of, they taped him and it was rerun, and I'm thinking, this guy's living in fantasy land. What do you think's going on in his mind?
Well, his campaign figures, the only way to stop Trump is to become Donald Trump. And that's what he's doing. He is, in essence, and they'll admit it, he's going into the gutter with Trump. He's trying to out-Trump Trump. And look, the reality is you can't out-Trump Trump. There's no way. Donald Trump feels very comfortable doing some of what he has to do to win during the primary season. But the problem for Marco Rubio is that this is not who Marco Rubio is. He's a young, energetic guy who talks about enthusiasm and brightness for America and the better day ahead. And then he decides to basically call out Donald Trump's spray tan and talk about body part. I mean, the whole thing is just not Marco Rubio. And so ultimately, voters are looking for authenticity. And the problem for Rubio is that he's not really being authentically who he is. And I think that's a big problem, especially in politics. The campaign feels he has to do this politically to win, but is it worth winning an election to lose some of who you are at your core?
That's very well said. Well, Cruz did what he expected. He won his state, and he had won statewide offices in Texas before, and he won convincingly. And he also won Oklahoma, and it looks like he got Alaska as well. What do you think about his chances?
Well, he's got a puncher's chance. I don't think there's any question about it. Look, I think what he's been trying to do all along is to do this idea that Donald Trump will be this implosion candidate at some point, that he will somehow mess up, and it never has happened. And so that's been a problem for Ted Cruz. So Ted Cruz is going to continue to point out the differences and see what happens. He's thrown the kitchen sink at Donald Trump. It hasn't worked so far. It's been very hard. Part of the problem here, Pat, if we can talk frankly about this, why not? We're on television, it's live. But here's the thing, with the narrative as it relates to Ted Cruz, it has gone south on him ever since Iowa. He got labeled with the dirty tricks out of Iowa, and then Marco Rubio and Donald Trump piled on with the liar and phony label. And look what happened to his numbers in South Carolina. He tanked with evangelicals, even though he won evangelicals in Iowa a few weeks before that. And so the narrative started to stick. And look at Super Tuesday yesterday. What happened? He didn't win in Tennessee, Arkansas, Georgia, Tennessee, all of these places where he was supposed to win. So it's a problem. Evangelicals are questioning whether or not Ted Cruz is the guy. And I think that's a problem for him. And let's also be honest here, Pat. Trump is an outsider who speaks like an outsider. Ted Cruz, on the other hand, is trying to be an outsider, but he speaks kind of like an insider, and it doesn't quite match.
Well, David, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, if Rubio loses in Florida, if Kasich loses in Ohio, you wonder what's going to happen. But it seemed like when Donald Trump was here talking to me, that the path was open before him. And if he talked about, running the table, he pretty much ran it yesterday, and he's going to keep on winning, it looks like. I don't see anything to stop him, do you?
No, I don't think so. They have to hope that there's an implosion moment for Donald Trump. They thought it was coming. It hasn't come yet. I'm not convinced it'll ever come at this point because Donald Trump is too close to this nomination, and I think he can smell it, he can taste it, and I don't think he'd do anything that stupid at this point to blow it. And look, it all comes down to this for Rubio. It's Florida or bust. He goes home on March 16th, the day after the March 15th Florida primary, if he does not win his home state. And John Kasich also, Ohio, that's it for him as well. So this thing is coming to an end pretty quickly in the next 2 weeks. It'll be Florida or bust. And I think after March 15th, in other words, March 16th, we'll have the final clear picture of exactly what's going to go on.
Well, David, stay with it, buddy. You're doing a good job. I appreciate it. Thanks, with the death of Justice Antonin Scalia, the vacancy on the Supreme Court has become a major issue in this presidential election. And today, a divided court is taking up its first abortion case in nearly a decade. Now, this deals with whether a state can enforce safety standards at abortion clinics. The issue is, can they make doctors at abortion clinics have admitting privileges at another hospital? Heather Sells had that story.
Pro-lifers and abortion supporters agree. The Supreme Court's decision could influence abortion laws across the country for years to come. The court is hearing a case on a Texas statute that requires abortion doctors to be able to admit patients to a local hospital. It also requires that abortion clinics meet the same safety standards that ambulatory surgical centers use.
A hallway has to be large enough to have an ER gurney come down the hallway if there is a complication. That makes sense. That protects the health and safety of a woman.
What the Texas law case is asking the court to decide is this: how important is health and safety? And do the states have the right to set medical standards for abortions? Abortion supporters say the Texas law threatens access and is merely an excuse to shut down clinics. They note half the state's abortion clinics have closed their doors since the bill passed in 2013. But pro-lifers reject that argument.
The law, of course, doesn't close any clinics. It sets standards that clinics are choosing not to comply with.
It's really an interesting and troubling situation in our country where veterinary clinics and manicurists and tanning salons are more regulated than abortion clinics, which involves an invasive surgical procedure for women.
No one really knows why so many abortion clinics in Texas and across the country are closing. It could be a declining abortion rate, but that's impossible to verify since the federal government does not require clinics to report their numbers. What pro-lifers do know, Planned Parenthood is making money. Its 2014 excess revenue, $127 million.
They could comply with these regulations in Texas. They just don't want to spend the money.
What's also clear, safety has been an issue for Texas abortion clinics. Planned Parenthood admits to at least 200 post-abortion hospitalizations every year there. And the state health department has cited 4 clinics in recent years. The violations include improper sterilization procedures, expired equipment, and expired CPR training. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Brilliant. Ladies and gentlemen, I just cannot understand how somebody can say they're pro-women. I am for woman's health, and yet at the same time they want some charnel house available for a woman to get butchered by somebody who is incompetent, and they don't want the latest medical technology available to women. And if a state makes that those standards, why anybody would say that's limiting a woman's access to abortion? The argument is absolutely nonsense, and it's before the Supreme Court. It should never have gotten there. That should never have been federalized. If Roe versus Wade was a disaster, it was called Blackmun's abortion. He's the one that wrote that decision, Roe versus Wade. And there's been confusion on abortion ever since. But it should be a matter of the state police powers, and the state should have the right to regulate the safety and health of the women in their state. And the idea that there's somehow a constitutional right to be butchered by some hack that doesn't know what he's doing just doesn't hold water. And it's a shame that Justice Scalia, if he was there would be clearly a 5-4 decision upholding the Texas statute. They may come out that way, or they could hold it off. They could hold the vote and say, well, we'll hold it until another justice is appointed. We don't know what they'll do, but that's a possibility. Wendy?
Well, up next, the vicious lie that's being spread about the state of Israel and the one woman who's determined to set the record straight. We'll talk with her next.
Well, in the late 20th century, an international boycott movement helped finally end South Africa's apartheid system. Today, Palestinians in the Middle East are gaining traction with a similar boycott campaign against the state of Israel, even calling Israel an apartheid state. But is that a fair comparison? Many South Africans say no way. Take a look.
From 1948 to 1994, South Africa endured a rigid political system of racial segregation and discrimination against its black citizens. This system was called apartheid. Today, anti-Israel speakers are misusing the word apartheid to spread a lie that delegitimizes the state of Israel.
Brick by brick, wall by wall, Israeli apartheid has to fall.
Olga Meshua is a South African attorney and activist who says this characterization of Israel is false and makes a mockery of the struggle her parents and grandparents endured under apartheid.
When I hear that Israel is an apartheid state, when people make that accusation, depending on the mood that I'm in on the day, I either pack out laughing or I get really, really angry, because it's an absolute lie.
To counter that lie, Meshu travels the world speaking out in support of Israel. She's the CEO of DAISY, an acronym that stands for Defend, Embrace, Invest, Support Israel.
Well, Olga Meshua is here right now. And Olga, I'm so glad to welcome you. How did you get into this crusade for Israel? You're a South African.
DAISY was actually started by my father, and he came home having been exposed to what the BDS was doing on university campuses in America. And he said that if there's going to be a response, then it has to come from black South Africans in particular who suffered during apartheid. We've got a responsibility to be ambassadors for truth. And he said, okay, girl, the Meshuas have got to do something about it. Come on.
Good for you. So you have become a crusader. All right, they're saying that Israel is an apartheid state. You lived under apartheid. I was there myself, witnessed apartheid, what it was. What's the difference? Israel is not an apartheid state, is it?
Absolutely not, sir. The laws of apartheid were absolutely horrible. By law, we were segregated. Black and white people couldn't be together. Our educational systems were not the same. We were deliberately educated so that we could be dumb and not arise above certain standards. We couldn't be, for example, in the legislature. We couldn't vote. We pretty much were treated like second-class citizens. But you go to Israel, you have Arabs and Jews in the Knesset. You have people being able to go to the same hospitals irrespective of either the color of their skin or their ethnicity. So it's an absolute lie. And in fact, when people compare Israel, the most democratic state in the Middle East, to what we suffered, what my parents in particular suffered and the generations before me, it actually trivializes what they went through. And so we have a responsibility to let the world know that a people that just want to see the destruction of Israel can't take our history and repackage it just because they want to see another nation's demise.
So they have hijacked your history and moved it to Israel. Well, how pervasive is this divestiture movement here in the United States? It's taken hold on many campuses, hasn't it?
It has, unfortunately, and I think the reason for it, including in my country, is because even though it's been 22 years after democracy, apartheid is still raw. So when you say apartheid, and when you say that there's a nation in the world that's experiencing that, people don't want to see the same suffering that South Africa had. And so they latch onto this particular movement, not understanding out of ignorance that it's an absolute lie and that it's baseless. And so those of us that know the truth have a responsibility to educate and say, guys, actually, it's not the case, and you're actually being misled.
Are you winning in your arguments?
I believe so, absolutely. What we found is as we start to engage with people and present them with the facts to say, this is what apartheid was, this is what Israel is doing. She's not perfect, but show me any nation in the world that is. This is how Israel has got an integrated society and some of the contributions that she makes not only to her own people, but across the world. People have started to ask questions, and I really do believe that as soon as people are prepared to ask questions and find out the truth for themselves, that we pretty much have started to win the battle.
Do you receive a hearing? I want to college campuses? Are you shouted down? People try to boycott your meetings, or are you open? Are they open to listen to what you have to say?
So Daisy's still quite new. We're about 2 years old, and our experiences so far on campuses is, depending on which campus you are, we do get shouted down at because people don't want to hear the truth, and because their argument is baseless, one can very quickly dispose of lies with truth, and when they realize that they've got nothing to come against you with, then they start to attack you personally. So depending on where we are, people listen, but otherwise, I'm not one to back down easily, so I'm always up for a good fight.
Well, you've been to Israel. How many times have you been there?
I've been three times.
3 times. Well, it is a free society, but I'm sure that they have to have a law and order. They can't just allow gangs to run wild.
But absolutely, Dr. Robinson. I mean, show me any nation in this world, including in my own country, we have got problems with crime in some of our areas, and there's actually places where they want to see your identity and know who you are. But when we see, for example, the requirement for people having to show their papers when they move, for example, from the West Bank into Israel, I had to show my papers when I came into America because I'm not American, and they wanted to see the fact that I had permission to be here. The same thing's happening in Israel. So why is she then being labeled as some nation that stands apart and just treats people unjustly when she's not? The double standards that are being applied to her are unfair.
Well, I'm sure the Israelis appreciate somebody as articulate and charming as you are. You have a law degree. You are an attorney?
I am, yes, sir.
Yeah.
I studied law in South Africa, and I practiced for 7.5 years. I don't practice full-time anymore. I do some part-time law. But yes, I am an attorney by profession.
Well, I'm so glad to see you, and thank you for the work you're doing. I know the Israelis are grateful for you.
It's a blessing to be able to do that, and to be able to be on the side of God's people. We've got to stand up for truth.
I totally agree. Well, we'll be back with more. Wendy, what do you have?
Fantastic interview. Thanks, Pat. Well, coming up, a look at the Jewish claims to the land of Israel.
Just scratch the surface and you find a rich Jewish culture and history of more than 3,500 years, ever since King David built Jerusalem.
The real story behind the oldest land dispute in history after this.
Well, it's the most contested piece of real estate probably in the world. In 1967, there was a war. It was started actually by the provocation of Nasser, President Nasser of Egypt. But Israel, in that war, captured what is called the West Bank. They call it Judea and Samaria. And UN Secretary General Kofi Annan referred to Israel's presence there as a, quote, illegal occupation. And Secretaries of State John Kerry and Hillary Clinton both called it, quote, illegitimate. But today, many world leaders still refer to the West Bank as occupied territory. But are those terms historically correct? We had our staff go back and take a look, and Gordon is the host of this particular segment to show you the historic basis of the claim to Judea and Samaria.
It's the oldest land dispute in history. For centuries, Jews and Arabs have both claimed to be the rightful owners of the land of Israel. Jewish claims to the land are based on 4 main arguments. The first is God's promise to Abraham. Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion often said that the Bible was the Jewish mandate for settling the land of Israel. In the book of Genesis, God gave the land to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the patriarchs of Israel. And the rest of the Bible tells the story of their descendants in the land. Moses led the Jews back to Israel after their exile in Egypt. And roughly 400 years later, around 1000 BC, King David conquered the city of Jerusalem and built his capital there. But the story of the Jews isn't limited to the borders of modern Israel. Their footprints have been traced throughout Judea and Samaria, now the Palestinian West Bank. Bethel, where Jacob dreamed of a ladder to heaven. Shiloh, the resting place of the Ark of the Covenant. Bethlehem, the birthplace of King David. And Hebron, where the Jewish patriarchs are buried.
This is all not just documented in the Bible and in history, it also reveals itself in every inch of the land. In any archaeological dig, you just scratch the surface and you find a rich Jewish culture and history of more than 3,500 years, ever since King David built Jerusalem 3,010 years ago.
The Jewish rule over Israel was also documented outside the Bible, often by the enemies of Israel. In Egypt, an inscription on the Merneptah Stela proclaimed in the 13th century BC that Israel has been laid waste. In 840 BC, the Moabite king Mesha wrote about the house of David, as did another king a century later, Hazael of Damascus. In the 1st century AD, the Jewish historian Josephus described in great detail the Jewish temple in Jerusalem and its destruction by the Romans, a story confirmed by a relief in the Arch of Titus in Rome.
Every day, archaeology yields more evidence of ancient Jewish culture dating back thousands of years. And in the 20th century, that historical connection has been recognized several times by international law.
In 1917, British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour issued a declaration calling for a Jewish homeland in Palestine, also known then as southern Syria.
Palestine included at the time all the territory which is now Israel, which is also Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, and Jordan.
In 1920, Allied leaders gathered in San Remo, Italy to divide the remains of the Ottoman Empire. They created the San Remo Resolution, which incorporated the Balfour Declaration. The resolution was signed by the members of the League of Nations, and the British were put in charge of Palestine. That meant they were legally bound to help the Jewish people build a state there. 2 years later, in 1922, the League adopted the British Mandate for Palestine, which recognized the historical connection of the Jewish people and the need for reconstituting their national home there. By that time, the land allocated to the Jewish people had been drastically reduced, with more than 75% of it going to the new Arab kingdom of Transjordan. The mandate was signed by all 51 members of the League of Nations, and once again, a Jewish state was guaranteed by international law. But 25 years later, that state still existed only on paper. And in 1945, the League was replaced by the United Nations. Article 80 of the UN Charter states that the UN would not alter existing states, peoples, or mandates, which means the UN legally recognized the right of the Jewish people to settle in Palestine, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea.
The United Nations is the legal successor and inheritor of the League of Nations, which means all obligations, commitments, and pledges of the League of Nations must be upheld by the United Nations. Unfortunately, they did not do it in the case of Israel and the Jewish ownership over their land.
In November 1947, the land intended for the Jews was divided once again. The UN voted to partition what was left of Palestine into two parts. 56% would be a Jewish state, with 43% going to an Arab state to be annexed to Jordan. Once again, a Jewish state was mandated by international law. Israel declared its independence in 1948. And a year later, the new state was admitted to the United Nations. But despite numerous legal endorsements, Israel's borders would still be disputed for decades to come as Arab leaders incited violence against Israel.
The Mufti Hajj Amin al-Husseini say, what they, the United Nations, write with ink, we destroyed by blood.
In 2002, UN Secretary General Kofi Annan famously used the phrase illegal occupation to describe Israel's annexation of the West Bank in 1967. But Annan's critics were quick to point out his use of the word illegal was incorrect because the West Bank never legally belonged to Palestinian Arabs in the first place.
Palestine was ruled by the Ottoman Turks from 1516 to 1918. Then for the next 30 years, it was controlled by the British until Israel declared its independence. During the war that followed, the Kingdom of Jordan invaded the West Bank and formally annexed the land in 1950.
There is a lack of historical understanding, and also there is an abuse here by this saying of international law. Since the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, was annexed by Jordan, it was a Jordanian territory, and in 1967, the 6 Days War, when Israel had, again, a campaign of self-defense, when 3 armies of Syria, Jordan, and Egypt were surrounding us, ready to drive us into the sea, Israel won the war, and as a result, we took into possession the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. This land was captured from Jordan.
Since Israel recaptured the land from Jordan, it now belongs to Israel, according to international law. One judge on the International Court of Justice wrote the following about the 1967 war. A state acting in lawful exercise of its right of self-defense may seize and occupy foreign territory, as long as such seizure and occupation are necessary to its self-defense. And where the prior holder of territory had seized that territory unlawfully, the state which subsequently takes that territory in the lawful exercise of self-defense has against that prior holder better title.
We bought our land in the blood of our soldiers. We didn't start with a war. The Arabs started with a war. All over the world, the idea when someone started with a war and he failed, he paid the price. He paid the price. So why we have to pay the price now?
The last claim the Jewish people make for the land of Israel focuses not on how they got it, but what they did with it. Today, Israel's population is well over 8 million. But in 1850, only 350,000 people lived in Israel and the West Bank. In 1857, the British consul in Palestine reported that the area was empty of inhabitants, and that its greatest need is a body of population. A decade later, British scientist H.B. Tristram wrote that whole villages there are rapidly disappearing from the face of the earth. And American writer Mark Twain wrote this about the Jezreel Valley. There is not a solitary village for 30 miles in either direction. There are 2 or 3 small clusters of Bedouin tents, but not a single permanent habitation. Today, many Palestinian Arabs claim that the Jews stole Arab land, evicted the owners, and left thousands of Arab farmers homeless. But is that the real story? Let's take a look. As early as the 1850s, Jewish people started buying land in Palestine, but their choices were limited by Arab sellers.
The Arabs settled mainly in mountainous areas, and they did not offer those lands for sale. The Arabs wanted to sell land in places where they did not live, in places which they had left in the past.
Records show that most of the land purchased by the Jews belonged to a small group of wealthy Muslim families, most of whom didn't even live in Palestine.
The Arabs were from many walks of life. Effendis who lived in Beirut and in Damascus, as well as locals. Also people who lived in the rural villages. All of them were willing to sell their land. There was always more land available than the demand for them.
From the beginning, the Jewish policy was clear. No Arabs were to be removed from their land against their will. In 1920, Zionist labor leader David Ben-Gurion announced that under no circumstances must we touch land belonging to fellahin or work by them. Only if a fellah leaves his place of settlement should we offer to buy his land at an appropriate price.
The Jewish National Fund bought the lands legally in order to fully secure the ownership of these lands. The Arabs were not evicted from the lands. They received compensation and the full process for the lands.
That compensation was documented by the British Peel Commission in 1937. The group had been sent to Palestine to investigate clashes between Arabs and Jews. Their report shows that of the 664 Arab workers dispossessed by land sales, 347 were resettled by the British government for free. The rest refused help and found employment elsewhere. Not only did the Jews buy the land legally, they also paid 10 times the normal rate. In 1944, the going rate for rich, fertile soil in Iowa was $110 an acre, while in Palestine, Jews were paying more than $1,000 an acre for arid, rocky land.
They say they are crazy. They buy this land. It's dirty land. It's no good land. But they are not stupid, and they know that we must work very hard, and they work very hard. Look what we have. We are only 66 years old, and look what we have already.
In the 19th century, life was hard under Ottoman rule for Arab workers in Palestine. Many had lost their farms to heavy Turkish taxes or Bedouin raiders. There were no schools, no electricity, and little sanitation. The average life expectancy for an Arab male in Palestine was 30.
With the arrival of the Jewish settlers, all of that started to change. With hard work, they turned swamps into vineyards, farms, and citrus groves. They introduced electricity to Palestine and improved the sanitation. They also worked to eradicate the mosquitoes that cause malaria. And the local Arabs benefited from their work. Over a 20-year period, the infant mortality rate for Arab children was cut in half, and the life expectancy for Arab men increased by 12 years. The Jewish landowners hired many of them to help work the land and paid them better than their Arab employers.
First of all, following the purchase of land, the Arab population had income. With the help of this money, they could improve their living, and the Arab society could raise their standard of living. So because of Jewish purchase of lands, the economic and social conditions of the Arab society were better.
Arabs from neighboring countries flocked to Palestine to take advantage of the higher standard of living. From 1922 to 1947, the total Arab population in Palestine more than doubled. In the city of Haifa, the number of Arabs increased by 290%. In Jerusalem, 131%, and in Jaffa, 158%. In 1939, Jewish scholar Martin Buber described the cooperation between Arabs and Jews in a letter to Mahatma Gandhi. The Jewish farmers have begun to teach their brothers, the Arab farmers, to cultivate the land more intensively. Together with them, we want to cultivate the land to serve it, as the Hebrew has it. The more fertile this soil becomes, the more space there will be for us and for them. We have no desire to dispossess them. We want to live with them.
By the time Israel declared independence in 1948, the Jewish people had already built a strong network of communal farms that stretched from the Galilee to the Negev. They'd also built schools, hospitals, roads, and cities. In other words, they were already functioning as an independent state.
When Ben-Gurion declared the foundation of the State of Israel in 1948, he already had a base, a territorial foundation of lands and settlements, a large number of settlements spread throughout Israel, settlements built on lands purchased by the Jewish people.
Despite the valid historical and legal claims of the Jewish people to their land, Israel's borders are still being negotiated after nearly 7 decades of statehood.
Even though there is no doubt, not historic, not moral, not archaeological doubt about the connection of Israel to the land and the land to Israel, Israelis are willing to compromise just in order to save lives, just in order to achieve peace. We will wait until we have a partner on the Palestinian side which is trustworthy, which does not believe in the destruction of Israel and the Jewish people as a way to build their own national narrative, and willing to live with us in peace and cooperation.
Fascinating. Well, that was the second of 3 parts to our new series, Whose Land Is It? If you missed an episode or you want to watch it again, you can just go to CBN.com. We have a special page set up where you can download and share the stories. You can also order this DVD. It's just $10. So make sure to go to CBN.com and find the Whose Land Is It link. And you don't want to miss this. Well, still ahead, it is time for your email questions. Doug says, my wife filed for divorce. My daughter blames me, and she won't speak to me. Is there anything I can do to fix my relationship with my child? Pat will tackle that question and much more right after this.
Welcome back to the 700 Club. South Dakota's governor has vetoed the state's transgender bathroom bill. Governor Dennis Daugaard rejected the bill, saying it, quote, does not address any pressing issue. The measure would have required students who identify as transgender to use bathrooms and locker rooms that match their gender at birth. The governor says signing the bill would create costly liability issues for schools and the state. North Carolina and Texas have approved transgender bathroom bills. ISIS is, quote, spreading like cancer among the refugees from Syria and other countries who have fled to Europe. That is the word from a top NATO commander, U.S. Air Force General Philip Breedlove. He told the Senate Armed Services Committee Tuesday ISIS fighters are hiding among the refugees. And he said he takes ISIS at its word that they intend to attack the West, including the U.S., and they'll continue to take the opportunity to hide among the refugees. Remember, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com. Pat and Wendy are back with more of the 700 Club. It's coming up right after this.
To see this week's most viewed stories, go to cbn.com.
When Sahitha was born with a cleft lip, neighbors told her parents that their daughter was cursed. Her mother and father not only worried about their baby's future, they also feared she might die.
Sahitha was born with a cleft lip. Her parents knew it would devastate her entire life.
I was sad and scared. When I tried to breastfeed her, she choked and cried. And when I fed her with a bottle, the milk often came out of her nose.
I was worried about her future. Would she be able to go to school? Would she ever get married?
No one was willing to help them in their small village in southern India. Many thought it was a generational curse.
When people saw her, they used to say, "Who knows what sin your forefathers might have committed?" to make your daughter be born like this?
Sahitha's father couldn't pay for a cleft lip operation. He's a barber, but he didn't make enough money to even run a shop. He spent most of his time going door to door looking for customers. Then CBN found out about Sahitha when she was 2.5 months old. We immediately gave her a free cleft lip surgery. 3 weeks after the operation, we visited the family.
We are so happy that she can easily drink milk, and she looks so beautiful.
We no longer are worried about her speech, education, or even marriage.
CBN also wanted to help Sahitha's father provide a better life for his wife and daughters. So we gave him a barbershop. All new equipment and supplies were included. Now he'll get a lot more business since his customers will come to him.
I will make sure that my daughters get good food, clothes, and education. And I will take them to doctors when they get sick. We are indebted to you. You gave my daughter the surgery she desperately needed, and you gave me a shop for my livelihood. Thank you so much.
Well, if you're a CBN partner, then you're responsible for Sahitha's beautiful smile today. You know, we can't do it without you. If you'd like to join the 700 Club, the number's right there on your screen, or you can log on to cbn.com and just say, yes, I want to be a part of what God is doing around the world and help people all over. Well, we have something for you when you call. It's called Heaven. This is Pat's new teaching. It's incredible. It's what God has prepared for those who love him. This is our free gift when you give us a call right now. Well, it is time to bring it on, and I believe you look ready.
Let's go for it.
Douglas says, Pat, my wife of 25 years filed for divorce, and our 20-year-old daughter has blamed me. My daughter moved out of the house when we talked to her and told me to never contact her again. I've tried to connect with her, but I haven't heard from her in 6 months now. She even ignored me on her birthday and over the holidays. Should I try to contact her before I leave, or should I obey her wishes? I miss her terribly and will probably be moving away soon.
Now, wait a minute. Wife leaves husband. That's the story. Wife leaves husband.
Well, they filed for divorce.
I dig it, but the wife is the one who filed.
Yeah, she filed. The wife filed for divorce.
So told the daughter, husband, who knows what lies that woman told that daughter about her husband? Who knows? Oh, he was a child molester, he's addicted to porn, he's a drug addict. Who knows what it... And that girl's mind has been polluted. But, you know, folks, it is the most awful thing. Don't ever do it. The idea of a wife or a mother trying to gain a child's affection by bad-mouthing the spouse. Look, you need to present a unified front, husband and wife together. And I remember one of my children said, you know, I love mommy and daddy. And the idea is that somehow I have got to make a choice. But that wife apparently polluted that daughter's mind. How are you going to get her back? Well, perhaps she could have counseling, or maybe God himself will show her. But all I can say to the guy who asked the question is continue to love your daughter, continue to let her know you care about her, and one of these days she'll wake up and realize. But you might ask her, what is it you think I did? Please tell me. Yes. Please tell me what it is you think I did so I can explain it to you. All right?
Yeah, that's good. Thanks, Pat. Well, Murray says, is it okay to donate your body to science after you die? I've had health problems and a kidney transplant and feel my body would be useful to medical students. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Look, once you leave it, it's just an old shell. Who needs it? I mean, it's worth about 90 cents or something. So sure, you can donate your organs to people, I mean, to medical science, for use as transplants and so forth. I think that's a very worthwhile thing to do. There's nothing that I know of that's unscriptural, unchristian about it.
Okay, John says, I know that there is all joy, happiness, and peace in heaven. My question is this. I've accepted Jesus and expect to spend eternity with him. A loved one has not accepted Jesus, and I pray for him daily. I hate the thought of spending eternity without him. Does God wipe away our memory of loved ones who do do not make it to heaven? If not, I would be eternally sad. Is there any biblical reference?
You think the story has to do with the rich man and Lazarus, was carried by the angels to Abraham's bosom, and he talked about, the relatives of the rich man. The rich man said, I've got some brothers and sisters back home, so forth. So there was a consciousness of the people back in this life. But Abraham said, there's a great gulf between us. You can't go over there, and they can't come over to you. But you ask, what'll happen is, you be in the presence of God. His love is going to be so overwhelming. It'll be like an explosion of atomic energy. It'll be so fantastic. And all the little things that were here on earth, the little joys, the little hurts, the little this, that, and the others, all will fade away in light of his glory and grace. And I remember there was a song, turn your eyes on Jesus, look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will become strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. When you get to heaven, you don't have to worry about the fact that you've left somebody behind. It'll be, all the sorrow will be eclipsed in the glory of the Lord. Well, we leave you with today's Power Minute from Psalm 84. For Jehovah God is our light and our protector. He gives us grace and glory. No good thing will he withhold from those who walk along his paths. Well, for Wendy and all of us, this is Pat Robertson. Thank you so much for being with us. And Lord willing, we'll be with you at the same time tomorrow. So be sure to tune in for the 700 Club. Bye-bye.